All right. Freila, Chevra. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Pesachim Daf Chof Hey. We began learning on Daf Chof Dalid Amid Beis. Amar Ababohu, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Version number 1. Kol Lisurim Shabatoyre Ein Loikin Aleon Elo Derech Achilosan. Version number 2, and this now you appreciate the hemshech from the whole sugi we learned beginning on Daf Chof Aleph Amid Beis. Rabbi Bohu was the one that said that every time the Torah says don't eat, eating includes hana'ah. In other words, not eating means not being allowed to have hana'ah. So the same principle of derech achilasan, likewise the same rule is by hana'ah. In other words, kol yisurim shabbat Torah ein loikin alein ela derech hana'asan. So if a person were to derive benefit shaloi kedarkoi, he's not liable to malchus. Comes along Abaya, and Abaya says, good, I have an exception. Kilei hakerem. And like Rashi pointed out, since the Torah doesn't say regarding kilei hakerem, don't eat. The words in the Torah is pentigdash hamaleya, lest that which will grow will become forbidden, but the Torah doesn't use a lashon achila. So therefore, not only may we not eat, not only may we not have hana from kilei hakerem, but even shaloi kederech hana'asan, you're also going to be chayiv malchus. In other words, Abaya has a unique chumrah by kilei hakerem. We began to learn the baraisa that we're going to repeat, but let me just go over the general daf. So we are in middle of challenging Abaya's shita from a baraisa, but Abaya is going to stand his ground. The next big topic that we're going to have on daf chafei is really a huge topic that we have in Sanhedrin, that we have in Yuma, and that is that even though the rule is, because of the words v'chai bahen, that if a person has to choose between one's life or a mitzvah, choose your life, but there are 3 exceptions. Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arois, and Shvichas Damim. And in the context of our sugya of Hana, the Gemara says that Bakoil Misrapin, that if a person's life is in danger, and what will save them is having hana'ah from something that's forbidden, even from something that's forbidden b'hana'ah for your life, you have to take that medicine. Bakoil misrapin chutz ma'atzei asher from Avodah Zarah. And how do we know that Avodah Zarah, like Gilui Arois, like Shvichas Damim, is something for which, if needed, the person has to give his life? And the third topic that we're going to learn about today, and that will be something that will already go into Daf Chavav, will be the following. Mamash Gavaldik Sugyas, and that is called Hana'ah Haboy Loy Adam Bal Karchay. In other words, a forbidden benefit that's coming to a person not against his will, but independent of his will. For example, we're speaking about Chametz B'Pesach. Chametz B'Pesach is Asur B'Hana, right? So when a person is walking down the street and they walk down a bakery and they smell Chametz, is there a problem with that? Or the example that the Gemara is going to be given, a person is walking by a base of Avodah Zarah, and there is an incense that the person would enjoy. You're not smelling it on purpose. You're walking down the street, but you're smelling something. Is it a problem? Is that a problem, or is that not a problem? And the two nekudos, which is going to make the whole sugya very fun by putting everything together, is efsher versus loy efsher, and mechaven versus loy mechaven. Efsher means that if let's go with our example that there's a base avodah zarah and there's a certain incense and it gives off a fragrance that otherwise would have been pleasant, but you don't want to smell, God forbid, a fragrance of avodah zarah. Efsher means that without additional effort you can take another route. That's called efsher. So that will play a factor. Well, is it efsher for you to go on a different route? And then there's another factor, and that is when you walk by this base avodah zarah and you happen to be smelling it, are you having intent to enjoy it, or you have no intent to enjoy it? Now you're smelling it; it's going into, you have a chush hareach, but there's no kavanah. And there's going to be a machlokes between Abaya and Rava. Abaya is the one that says that it's permitted. In other words, no additional effort has to be made to change your route. Rava says it's forbidden. The question will be, and there'll be 2 versions, exactly where do they argue? The first version is that they argue where it's efsher However, v'loy mechaven, and the second version is that they argue by the loy efshed and yes v'kam mechaven. We're going to speak all of the details out, God willing, as we learn the daf. We left off on the 9th line from the top of the Amid. So where are we at? Again, Abaya has this unique chumrah that kilei hakedem, which is asur bahana, has no heter that if it's shaloi kederach hana asan, you're not chayiv malchus. Yes, you are. So the kasha is like this. The Braisa is teaching us, Isi ben Yehuda says, how do we know regarding basar b'chalav, that we're not allowed to cook it? It's explicit. How do we know that we may not eat basar b'chalav that was cooked together? So he learned that out from Treifa, because the Torah uses the expression of ki am kodesh ato, by the isur of basar b'chalav, and va'anshi kodesh tiyolin, by the basar Treifa. But how do we know that cooked basar b'chalav is asur bahana? So we went through 3 steps. So Isa ben Yehuda says, I have a kal v'chaymer. Step number 1 is I learned it from Arla. We cannot learn it from Arla that we had on top of the Amid, because Arla has a unique chumrah. Arla never had a shas hakoishet. No, it's from when you plant it until the end of the halachic 3rd year, you can never eat it. Maybe that's why Arla is asur bahana. Basar b'chalav, before you cooked it together, was permitted. Okay, so then the Braisa went, I'm going to learn the Isur of Anah by Basar B'chala from Chametz. Chametz has a Shas HaKosher before Pesach. Nevertheless, on Pesach, it's Asur B'Hanah. Says the Gemara, you can't learn it from Chametz. Why can't you learn it from Chametz? Because Chametz has a unique Chumrah. Chametz is a Kaddish. For Kalayim, there's no Isur Kaddish. So then the 3rd one is that the Isi ben Yehuda, we learned the Isur of Basar B'Chala, B'Hanah, the Isur Hanah of Basar B'Chala from Kilei HaKerem. That kilei hakerem has no punishment of kaddish, and it's asur b'hana. So cooked together, basar b'chalav is asur b'hana. So now came the Gemara and asked on Abaya, right? We can't learn it from Arla. We can't learn it from Chametz. We can't learn it from Chametz because they have a unique chumrah. Well, so does kilei hakerem la Abaya. Abaya holds that kilei hakerem is asur b'hana, and there's no heter that if it's shaloi kederach hana asan, you're not going to be chayiv malchus. You will be chayiv malchus. So there is a unique chumrah. So why does that not refute the kal v'chaymer? That's where we left off. In the beginning of the line, from 9 lines from the top of the Amid, Abaya says he completely rejects that question. Abaya says, Abaya, toimer b'mai. Toimer b'mai is, finish your question. What's your question? That kilei hakerem is more chamur than basar b'chalav. How is it more chamur? Because by kilei hakerem, right, you're like afilu shaloika darachana yosei. So he says, okay, firois. And what are you going to say that toimer b'basar b'chalav she'ein loikin olav ela darachana yosei? Says Abaye, that's not true. That's not true. Atur b'basar b'chalav achila ksiv bei. Why does Abaya say that kilei hakerem has this unique chumrah? Because since the isur, the prohibition, the heter of shaloi kederech is all really based on the, like Rabbi Bo began, that Hanaz linked to achila, and by kilei hakerem the Torah never uses the words of an isur achila. The Torah says pentigdash, so taka, there's no heter. You know, my friends, by basar b'chalav, the Torah also never says you can't eat basar b'chalav. Adarabba, basar b'chalav will taka be like kilei hakerem. The prohibition will be even shaloi kederach achilase, even shaloi kederach hanaase, gavaldik. So there's no refutation. Now this is such a great answer that the Gemara wonders what was even the question on Abaya. Abaya explained himself. Abaya says the reason why he's machmar by kilei hakerem is because the Torah doesn't use the word achila. Well, the word achila is not written by basar b'chalav. So the idach, the Kol Ma'asav law, says the Gemara Savar that lahacha kagamar min avela, and Hanami, the Torah doesn't write the word of achila, of isur achila by kilei hakerem. But how do we know it's asur b'achila? So we learn it out from treifa. Rashi says nevela here is lav dafka. Now by treifa it says you're not allowed to eat it. Manavela, because the Torah is using the words of the isur achila, so we know. Like we said, achila, then Rabbi Bo l'shitasi extending to hana, derech hana asoi, avasa b'chalav, you are only chayv derech hana asoi. However, Abaya has how to answer. Abaya says, I know that we learned the isur from nevela, from treifa, but the Torah doesn't write, you're not allowed to eat basar b'chalav. Lahachi le'kasav achila b'gufay. And taka, why not? Now you know why not. Because the Torah really wants us to know, so now we have Abaya standing, and now we have the limud from Isi ben Yehuda. The Isur Achila Basar B'Cholov is from Treifa, and the Isur Ano is from Kilei HaKerem. Now, the first attempted proof from Isi ben Yehuda in the Braisa was to learn it out from Arla. The reason why Arla was not a good teacher is because Arla has a unique chumrah, and that is it has no shas hakoisher. So now the Gemara is wondering, why isn't that same question a question from Kilei HaKerem? Why doesn't the Braisa ask, Mala Kilei HaKerem, Shekein lehoisel shas hakoisher? Kilei HaKerem means that you have, let's say, a vineyard. And if you plant in the vineyard or with the halachic proximity to the vineyard, greens or grains, from the beginning, it's asur. It's also something that has no shas hakoisher. Answers the Gemara. Now hold on. Before you plant it together, didn't exist l'chayr, right? Well, from when you plant it, so you have a vineyard. It's not kilei hakerem. It's not a mixture. It's just a kerem. The kilayim, from when you plant the kilayim, it's right away prohibited. Amar. From the fact that the Braisa doesn't challenge the limud from Kilei HaKerem, as it does by Arla, is a proof. This is an important sugya that Kilei HaKerem ikara ne'esarim, that by Kilei HaKerem, the original plantings, from when they take root, they themselves become prohibited as well, meaning you have a vineyard. You plant over here grain, let's say. Now, until the grain takes root, there is no isur yet. When the grain, seeds, kernels, when they take root, don't learn pshat that, and from then on you have kilei hakerem. So what's the isur? The additional growth. No. The pshat is, because if that would be the case, then there was something here that had the shas hakoisher. What happens over here is that retroactively everything that was planted becomes prohibited as well. And what did we benefit by it? Gavaldik. Now kilei hakerem had a shas hakoisher, because the kernels that you planted in the ground before it took root, those kernels were permitted. And these very kernels now become asur. So Kilei HaKerem has some part of it that does has a shas hakoisher. And nevertheless, it's asur b'hana. And like Abaye says, not stam, it's asur b'hana. There's no heter of shaloik derech hana asoi. So it becomes a great teacher for Basar B'Cholov, which is the same. There was a time that it was permitted, and then it became asur. Without this, one might have thought that what is prohibited, only the additional growth. And then you would have a good kasha, because the additional growth was not in the world yet, and from when it came into the world, it right away became prohibited. So the isud never had a shas hakoisher. Says the Gemara, it's not true. That which was permitted, which was the kernel itself becomes prohibited after it takes root. So there's something in the kalayim that had a shas hakoisher and now becomes asur. So hoyel v'hoyselehem shas hakoisher koidem hashrasha. And the Gemara is going to challenge that rule. You're telling me that whatever was planted in the ground itself becomes prohibited after it takes root, and not only the growth. Masav Rab Shemaya. It says in a Mishnah. The Mishnah is speaking about someone who has a vineyard, and they are walking through their vineyard holding a perforated pot. Guys, you remember the din of a perforated pot? A perforated pot means an otzitz nakuv, that there is a hole in the bottom of this plant pot through which a small root can fit. And the Torah says that if it's within a certain proximity of the ground, whatever is in the pot is also deriving its nourishment from the earth and the ground. So if you're walking through a field, a kedem, with a perforated pot, then you got yourself a problem with kalayim if there is additional growth. Oh, so it says in the Mishnah, otzitz nakuv bekedem, im hoisiv masayim aser. The rule of Kilei HaKerem is independent of this case. We'll bring it back in a moment. Normally, when it comes to non-kosher becomes batal, guys, beroiv. And the tam of Isur becomes batal b'shishim. That's more or less how much more ratio do you need to take away the taste. Truma, we know, is batal in the ratio of 100 to 1. And Arla is a kalayim and Arla. But with kalayim is batal in a ratio of 200 to 1. So says the Mishnah that if the person had that perforated pot enough time over the vineyard that whatever was in the pot grew how much more? A 200th, right? In other words, if the isur would be less than that, it would be so little that whatever was there prior was more than the 200 to 1. So then it's bottle. But the moment hoisiv masayim, no, it's you don't have the ratio anymore of 100 to 1. The growth is so much, you only have 199 to 1. So it's not bottle. Now everything is asur. So what do we see from the Mishnah? That when something begins to grow, what part of it is forbidden? Only the additional growth. Which is why if the additional growth is so little, if the prohibited growth is so little, that what was there prior is still 200 against 1 or more, then it's mavatal the isur. Only if the isur itself is so much more that there isn't 200 to 1, so it's not batal. Clearly, taking out the dinim of bittul, whatever was there prior does not become asur, which is why it has the koyach to be mevatal, the addition. Only the addition is prohibited. Hoisiv in loy, hoisiv loy. And you're telling me a chiddush that once you have kilei akedem, then everything that was there prior also becomes prohibited. So says the Gemara, you're right. You're right. There are two dinim in kilei akedem, and there are two different cases. And sometimes by kilei akedem, sometimes there is no shas hakoishet. Sometimes what is prohibited is only the additional growth. But there are also other times that what becomes, once there is an isur, it goes back even on that which was permitted. And therefore, there is some aspect of kilei akedem that still has a shas hakoishet. And Amarav indeed, today, kroi ksivi. There are two verses. By the way, it doesn't mean two verses. It means two words in the same pasuk. The pasuk that we read yesterday from Parshas Kitzeitze reads that loisizra karmacha kalayim pentigdash hamaleya. Guys, maleya means the additional growth. No, it's tigdash means forbidden. That the maleya will become forbidden. Clearly, not what was there prior. And the next word in the Torah is pentigdash hamaleya hazera asher tizra. Hazera means the seed itself becomes prohibited. So it says hazera and it says hamaleya. And they're both true. The word haketzad, the word zera, which indicates that the seed itself becomes prohibited. That's zorua me'ekaroi. When you plant a seed in the ground, none of it was growing before. Then the rule is that when it takes root, what is prohibited is not only the root, and what grows out of the root is the zera itself becomes prohibited. Zera me'ekaroi is bahashrasha. From when it takes root, there is that everything becomes prohibited. But zarua uba, but if something already grew, it's in a pot. There is already growth in there. There are grains that are grown in there. Now the problem is that it's going to grow even more when it's deriving nourishment from the vineyard. Here, only the mileya is asur, and therefore hoisiv in. If the additional is so much that there isn't enough of the original to be mevatel 200 to 1. That's when you have a problem. But loy hoisif, right? Loy. But if you don't have enough growth to disallow bittul, if there's still enough of the original that's 200 or more against what grew, the original does not become asur. So in the case of the atzitz nakif, the isur never had a shas hakoishet, emes. But there is, when you plant in the ground of a kerem, there the din is that even that which had a shas hakoishet also becomes asur from when it takes root. But not only the root, everything. So since there is an aspect of kilei akedem that even though it has a shas hakoishet, there is an isur. And with the chumrah, and it's so asur that even shaloi kedarachana asur yechayiv malkis, it's a good melamed, it's a good teacher. That teaches us that the basar b'cholav, which is the same, there is a shas hakoishet. And taka, when it becomes asur, it's taka asur to derive benefit from basar b'cholav. Even shaloi kederach achi losoi, and indeed basar b'cholav is asur b'hana. Nekuda. That's the end of that first part of today. So behemshich to the whole concept of an isur hana'ah, guys, this is a very important sugya. I know we're learning it quickly, but we have this in Yuma. And we have this in Sanhedrin, and this is, known a lot more than most. The din that there are three mitzvahs in which we are actually commanded to give up our lives al kiddush Hashem. And one of them we mentioned every day in the Shema, which is about avodah zarah. So let's begin. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Bakoil misrapen. One may be healed from any substance, says Rashi, 2 lines in front of the bottom of the Amud, even from a substance where the prohibition is so big that God says don't even have hana'ah, you can use it to heal yourself. The question is why? If it's also about hana'ah, why? Chutz ma'atzei asherah. There are certain trees that the goyim used to plant for an idol, as an idol. They're called asherah trees. And if a person can get healing from the atzei asherah, then they're not allowed to do that. So the Gemara asks, what are we talking about? Hold on. Hechidami. In name of the ikasakana, if we're speaking about a person who's deathly ill, so then, and we're beginning with the premise, before we know that these are exceptions, the premise is, the Torah says, v'chai bohem. V'chai bohem generally trumps all the mitzvahs, because v'chai bohem is a super mitzvah. You got to live. Afilu atzei asherah nami, if the only medicine comes from an atzei asherah, and if you're going to die without it, why would you not be allowed to take it? Elamad, Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan is speaking about the lakasakana. If there's no danger, then afilu kol isurim shebatorah nami loy. If Hashem says don't have hana'ah, how can you have hana'ah from anything that's asur b'hana'ah? So therefore it must be la'olam. We're speaking about the ikasakana. And that justifies it, even though we're not allowed to have hana'ah, but whenever it's the option of dying or violating that Isra Nog, Hashem wants us to live. And that's the chiddush. Nevertheless, if it's an idol tree, you may not derive benefit. Now, guys, before you go on, just think a second. Why not? When you're getting hana'ah, meaning that you're getting your medicinal potion from Atzei Asherah, you're not worshiping the Asherah. You're not Oived Avodah Zarah. You're taking a medicine that has in it wood that someone else served. Now I understand. We shouldn't have hana'ah, but how is that idol worship? You see, there's a chiddush over here. This is beyond just don't bow down to an idol. That's really the sugya and yuma. Here, this is behemshich to the holy surah hana'ah. So there's a big machlokas Rashi.
You have to give your life not to have hana'ah from avodah zarah. That's what it's saying?
That's what it's saying. That's something beyond what we have in Sanhedrin. Correct. And the question is why? Ad kedei kach. So look inside the last mamish, the end of Rashi in the Amud. The last few words of Rashi in this Amud is that the Hamasrapa ba'atzei asherah nira kemoidaba. Imagine, nira kemoidaba, die al kiddush Hashem. Give your life for God. Tosfos holds, also the last Tosfos in the Amud, I'm reading in the 3rd line in the Tosfos, mishum da'asi lemite baser avodah zarah. It's not because nira kemoida, because if the only refuah a person gets will be from an idol, that person, God forbid, will say, well, there must be something over here. I was going to die. Nothing else worked. Boom, this avodah zarah worked. Ooh. So this might lead the person after avodah zarah. That's the machlokas Rashi Tosfos. That's a big machlokas. Let's go back into the Gemara.
Yeah, but then you should be chayav, at that time, not now, just for...
Okay, that's the chiddush. I'm saying, at least we should have people run through it and they say, I know this. No, you don't know this. Even if you remember human Sanhedrin, we're going beyond that. We're not speaking about direct idol worship. We're speaking about not getting hana'ah as medicine from something that some other person worshipped, from an avodah zarah. Okay, so that's the word. So now this Bryce again, we have this also in Brachas, the Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Oimer. Now this is explaining the pasuk of Shema Yisrael, right? That believe in one, love God. Rashi says, not b'chol libecha, but 2 bases, b'chol levavecha b'shnei yitzorecha. Then it says b'chol nafshecha. Now Rashi says b'chol nafshecha, afilu noitel nafshecha. No, it's with all of your soul means you love God, even if you have to give your soul. Now, what does that mean, to give your soul? What would be the opposite of loving God? That's the context. The opposite would be avodah zarah, the complete denial of God. So if there is an avodah zarah issue, then you have to give your soul. Now, once the Torah commands us even to give up our lives, not to fall into any type of avodah zarah, so the next words are superfluous. The literal pshat of b'chol me'oidecha means with all of your money. I know that Rashi writes something else. We learn in Chassidus, beyond your ability, your b'chol me'oidecha, but the pshat is Love God with all of your soul and with all of your resources. So isn't that something that's given? If you love God, if you're willing to give your life, with your avada included, you're going to give all your resources. So that's the beginning of the Braisa. So Rabbi Eliezer asks, Lama nemer b'chol mo'idecha. Or the im nemer b'chol mo'idecha, if b'chol mo'idecha is the max for some reason, so that should include in it b'chol nafshecha. Tell me the one that is the greatest demand, and then everything less than that is automatically included. So Rabbi Eliezer says that there are different types of people. For some people, the greatest resource they have is their money, and for other people, there's their life. And God says, whichever type of person you are, dafka over there, give that up, not to go against the v'ahavta, which means not to serve an idol. Gufe meaning his life. So God says, give up your life. Money is more important. Now, money is more important when it comes to mamash dying. No one is going to make the money more important. But many people will tolerate a lot of pain and they will risk their life to save some money. So if money is that important, God says, b'chol moedach. Bottom line is, we see from this Braisa that, again, it's not even written here. B'chol nafshecha means give up your life. It's automatically self-understood that we're speaking about Avodah Zarah, because what is the opposite of Avos Hashem? Denying of God. Okay. Now, now we had it from Rabbi Yaakov. Now we have again, Rabbi Yochanan lived in Eretz Yisrael. He came back, and Nachamal, he said, Bakol Misrapin, but over here, in his version, he didn't only mention Bakol Misrapin, Chutz Ma'atzei Asherah. Here he says, Bakol Misrapin, Chutz, from all of the three. Avodah Zarah, same concept. You can't get medicine. You're not serving it. You can't get medicine from something that was an idol or that is an idol. Or you can't get healed from an act of Gili Arois, which is forbidden sexual relations. Even though without this act, you're going to die, and Chafei Amid Beis, and Shvichas Damim. A person will die, right, if they won't kill. But that will be the simple case. The source of that is from the words b'chol nafshecha. That's good to know the source. B'chol nafshecha counters the v'chai bohem. How do you know concerning Gilei Arois and Shvichas Damim? That's human, that's Sanhedrin. So the Tanya, Rabbi Yoimer, according to our pasuk in Parshas Ki Seitzei, by Anara HaMe'urasa, with all of the pratim. So it's a certain age bracket. And she's biblically engaged, not what the people say engaged, which means that she's considered a bona fide Ashes Ish. And the pasuk here is speaking about a man who, God forbid, is going to rape her. It's against her will. He raped her in the field. She was not shouting because she had no one to shout to. And they were caught. So the pasuk says that Kikasher, reading inside, Yakum ish al re'eyu u'retzachay nefesh, just like when A is murdering B, kein hadavar hazeh. Same is like over here, that the man is the guilty party, and the Torah says Vilanara loy sasa davar. She's completely innocent. Now, why do we need to have this comparison to murder? We get it. A man, God forbid, raped a woman. It was against her will. The Torah should say Vilanara loy sasa davar. What do we need to learn from? Just like when there's a case of murder, same thing over here. That means that the Torah making this juxtaposition is teaching us an additional din. Now, when you read this pasuk, who is the teacher, who's the student? Just like by murder, same over here. It's mashma that there is a din by murder, and that is going to be extended over, let's call that teacher-student, to the case of the Nara HaMe'orasa. Let's read it inside. The Rabbi says it's the opposite. Many times that's the way, the reality. That not the teacher is teaching the student, but the student is teaching the teacher, and then also the teacher teaches the student. That's what Rabbi says. That means, why do we need that comparison? It's self-understood. So says Rabbi, that's a beautiful expression of Tanoim. In other words, you think that murder is the source law and the derived law is not Amorasa. No. It's Lamed. Let's begin it the other way around. First, the student will teach the teacher. God makes that comparison to teach you first that that there's a din that we know. Rashi tells us, if you want to look inside Rashi, also from Parshas Kisei, say 7 lines on top of the Amud, just the din. The din is that nita lahatzila benafshay. That means that if a man is witnessing a rapist about to rape a woman, and the only way to stop the rapist is by killing the rapist, we are obligated to kill the rapist. How do we know that? From another pasuk. Well, that's already an established halacha. So if you can prevent this from happening, and the only way is by taking a life, then take the life. So the Torah makes this juxtaposition to tell you that that's the big din of a roidev, which means that if you are witnessing Reuven chasing Shimon, God forbid, and you see Reuven is going to kill Shimon, if the only way to stop Reuven is by killing Reuven, you are obligated to kill Reuven. We are obligated to kill a roidev. How do you know that from? You can argue, listen, someone will die. Why should it be Reuven? Why not Shimon? Who are you to judge? Maybe what you're seeing is not all the story. All Gavaldik. The Torah is telling you from this juxtaposition that when a man is about to rape a woman, the din is you have to stop the rapist. And if the only way is by killing the potential rapist, kill him. When you see one running after the other to murder the other, stop that from happening, even if the only way is by killing the potential murderer. Now, by the way, this is not the end of the story. So first, the student teaches the teacher. And now Taka Rebbe says, I mean, you have to learn the pshat. The Torah says, just like by murder, Kain hadavar hazeh by nara hamorasa. So there is Taka now also something that goes the other way around, and that's this halacha. And that is, the nara hamorasa is Taka, a student learns a din from the Zajac. What din? Mara Zajac. Just like when it comes to the sin of murder. Sin of murder. Not speaking about one guy chasing the other. The tzicha. Yeh hareg va'aliyah. The person, as we'll give an example, a person will be told, either you kill or I will kill you. So allow yourself to get killed, but don't violate the loy sirtzach, yehorig va'al yavod, af narahameurasa, that if a woman, right, we're speaking about a woman, we'll get to Tosfos in a moment, the case of aroyos, tehorig va'al tavor. If the only way she can stop the act of gila aroyos is by allowing herself to be killed, she should tehareg is lashon nekeva, right? Tehareg va'aliyah va'altaver. It's we have a few minutes extra. We're here already, so let's stop at least here and speak about this. Not so pashut this. Not only is it not so pashut, but remember in the beginning of Ksubis, the Gemara says, how was Esther? Esther was married to Mordechay. How was she allowed to have a relation with Achashverosh? And that's the Gemara says that Esther karko olam. Karko olam means that this din of giving up our lives and not violating is only if the violation is an active violation. But if the violation of these sins are a passive violation, then you're not mechuyev to give up your life. Now that means that when it comes to an act of a sexual relation, the woman can be completely passive. She can be like karka olam. A man, right? Because since ein kishoy ela badas, no, that kishoy is called active. So if a man is told, have a relation that's considered giloy aroyos or not, I will kill you. On a man, we say, ye hareg va'al ya'avoid in the masculine. But l'chayra, a woman, now it wouldn't be a problem if tak indeed, as most learn, a woman is not mechuyev to give up her life. It doesn't bother us that this is learned from a pasuk that's speaking about Nara Hamorasa. That's fine. The hekesh, the beginning, that's maybe Rabbi also. The beginning of the hekesh is telling you the din of a roidef, that nitan lahatzila benafshoy. But there's also the teacher is retzicha for the concept of these. This is one of the three that yaharig val yavod. So look inside the top Tosfos. The top Tosfos has a different girsa, so it circumvents the whole issue. It's not in the feminine. It's not tehareg. And Tosfos says clearly, look inside Tosfos, perush haboyel. If a man has to make that choice, he has to give up his life. Aval he faked tiboel v'loy tehareg. Why? Because she's not active. A woman has the choice not to be active. The karka oilami. This is a very important. Let's go back to the sugya. And you do have a gift.
We always learn there's the three mitzvahs that you have to give your life for, right? And it's avodah zara, shvichas damim, and gilei arayos. So is this Naira Marasa? Is this teaching us Gila Arayas? Meaning, like, if it's an Ashes Ish, the same din. No, you can't go be boil an Ashes Ish. You have to give your life for it.
Sure. That's the source.
So the source is Naira Marasa.
The source.
Is there a difference between Naira and Marasa and any other dins nus or?
Correct. The case, but don't think it. The source is Ritzicha. No, there's a hekesh. One of the things, the second thing we learn from this hekesh is that just like by Ritzicha, you have to give up your life. By the general Gilei Aroyos, the active one has to give up his life. Now, the beauty here is that Tzleida Shebal Peh is that the teacher, which is Ritzicha, there's no pasuk by Ritzicha. So we established a pasuk by Avodah Zarah. If there would have been now a hekesh between Avodah Zarah and Gilei Aroyos, so now you have a hekesh. We established B'chol Nafshecha. Same thing is also by Gilei Aroyos. Here, Rebbe is making a hekesh between Gilei Aroyos and Ritzicha. But nowhere does it say that for Ritzicha you have to give up your life. So the Gemara says, Ushvichas damim guf, I mean, Alan. We're building on top of it, and the Gemara says, Taka, there's no pasuk. It's a svara. Svarahu. And by the way, that's one of the proofs that a svara is considered the din de oiraisa, which is kind of amazing. You don't need a pasuk. If something is logical, then that's a din Torah. Okay, and Elyahu, the asal kamed Rava, Amar Lei, a person tells Rava a terrible thing happened to him. That Marai Durai Nusen, right, the governor of my town, Amar Li, told me, Zil Katle Leplani. It says the governor told me that I have to murder someone else, and if I'm not going to execute that other person, then the governor is going to kill me. The Imloi Katil Nalach. That's a case where he was being challenged to actively violate on murder. What should I do? So Rava tells him that liktiluch, you have to allow yourself to get killed, and and you don't kill. Why? Now Rava knew there's no pasuk for that. And that's a good thing for a Rava. When a Rava gives up psak, especially like this, you have to give the source. So his source was a svara. This is words of Rava, that my chazis, what makes you see? Why do you think that the dama didach sumak tvei, that your blood is redder? That's his expression. Dilma, maybe dama da ugavra sumak tvei, maybe the blood of the other person is redder. Do nothing. Don't be active. Being active is a decision that someone is going to die. So therefore, you're choosing it should be someone else. You can't do anything. Now, doing nothing means that someone will kill you. So be it. God forbid. But you can't actively go against these three Avedas. Okay. All of the pratim we have in this. Says the Gemara. Now that we learned Bakoil Misrapin, now that we have this rule, that Bakoil Misrapin, when there is a danger of life, Bakoil Misrapin, chutz, even there, not from Ate Ashera. Marba Ravashi, that was his name, the son of Ravashi. No, Ravina and Ravashi compiled the Gemara. So when it comes to Ravashi and Ravina, the teacher was Ravashi, and the student, so to say, was Ravina. But here, when it's Marba Ravashi, Ravina was the teacher. Marba Ravashi, he found Ravina. And what did he witness Ravina doing? That Shoyef Leila Barte, he saw that Ravina was rubbing in his daughter Bigoharke de Arla. Oil. They used to make certain medicinal potions of oil that came from underdeveloped olives. Now, those underdeveloped olives, for some reason, Mar knew they were Arla. Maybe by the very fact that they were underdeveloped, maybe that's the way it was. He knew it was Arla. So he saw him taking, now guys, we learned already, not like we learned, it was just yesterday, 2 days ago, that fruit juices of Arla might not be prohibited, not biblically, because it's not the Peta. But we also learned in that same Mishnah that when it comes to oil and to wine, the main fruit of a grape is the wine. The main fruit of the olive is the oil. That's for sure prohibited as Arla. And Arla we also learned is Asur Bahana. And not only that, in the sugya of Isur Hana, that is Kederach. That's Kederach Hana Asi, taking oil and rubbing it into a skin. That's the way, the cream of the days of old was. Not only in the days of old was Jonathan. Many people today, that's what they do. They take olive oil and they use it as body lotion. So Amarlei, if I state this, so Marbar Avashi thought, because when we began the sugya, it wasn't that Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Bakol Misrapin, when there's a sakana. He made a very generic statement. It's not clear. But now that we clarified that you can only Bakol Misrapin when there's a sakana, so Amalei, so Ravina, this is Marbar Avashi telling Ravina, Emer the Amar Rabbanan, only B'shas sakana, that you can use even from an Isur Hana when there's a life danger. But Shalei B'shas sakana mi Amor. So Amalei, so Ravina tells him, listen, my daughter has fever. Fever is shas sakana, or maybe this type of fever. High ishta tzimirta, this burning was it's a high fever. Nami keshas sakana damio. We're living in a new world that we have antibiotics and we have Tylenol and Advil. In those days, if a person had high fever, their life was in danger. And anything that might make them better was something that you have to do, again, aside of the big three. So therefore, yes, he knew it's Arla and it's Asur Bahana and it's Kedera Chana Asai, and yes, life comes first. Now, Ikada Amri, other version is that it was not that this was a danger of life, but Ravina held that using oil, smearing it into the skin in order to make her better, that's not called Derech Chana Asai. Am I doing something that's b'derech hana? So here we have a machlokes chevra. Jonathan is not on yet. Whether using olive oil to smear on your body is something usual or is it something unusual? Gavaldik. How much can you charge for the bar of soap? Machlokes here in the Gemara between these two versions. Okay.
Yeah, but the idea being that olive oil, the normal derech hana is consumption, right? Using it in your food.
No. Derech achilas is derech hana means other hanas. In other words, derech hana, smearing something in your skin. First of all, stem from the whole sugi of Yom Kippur. Smearing sicha is shesiya. Make that clear. But whether, in other words, maybe it's up to the location. Like who's to define derech achilas? It's like a cultural thing. There are many mitzvahs are that way. That the way you define whether it's permitted or prohibited is how are people nohig. Could be that's the machlokes. Whether it was normal for people then to use olive oil to smear when the person has fever. Okay, guys, this is Gavaldik. So as we mentioned in the introduction, we're beginning the sugya, which is connected to Pesach, called Hana'a Habaloi La'adam Bal Karchai. Now I know my Bal Karchai normally means against your will. It doesn't mean here against your will. The word, very important, the word Bal Karchai here means independent of your will. Independent. There are times that you happen to have Hana'a. You were not going there to have Hana'a. You were not, you did not want the Hana'a, but it's there. So let's use the example that Chazal give, is that for people that enjoy a certain type of fragrance, shmekachs, and that is something that's being offered by a church, mashal today. There's a certain type of perfume that's verspritzt in a church, and every time you walk by the church, you have a woof of, you smell it. Avodah Zarah. Are you prohibited from even walking down that block? That is the question. Now there's two pillars, and everything will depend on that. There's efshed, veloy efshed. There's mechaven, veloy mechaven. We'll explain it as we read it inside. So itmer, nachama, hana'ah habaloy la'adam bal karchai. Any type of pleasure or benefit that's coming to a person independent of his will. Not against, he's not against it, but he wasn't looking for that. He just wants to go from point A to point B. Abaya says muteris. What does muteris mean? You don't need to avoid it. That's pshat muteris. And Rabbi says that it's asura. But because if bal karchai would mean bal karchai, it's against your will. Asura means that avoid it. How much effort do you have to make to avoid it? All that will be defined right now. So now we're going to have a clarification of where is it that they argue. And the beauty of this sugya, it's going to keep us on our toes, is to halk up between two ikeda amris. We're learning now version number one. Version number one. In the case where it's efsher, efsher means that it is avoidable. It's not avoidable. Of course it's avoidable in the case of the church. Don't walk down that block. The question is, how much disturbance will it cause for you to take another route? Now, again, I'm not speaking about the exact. First, it's important to get the concept, not the application. Application is sometimes even harder, but that's not done in the Gemara. If there are two roads and they're both equally convenient. That's called efsher. Efsher means it's avoidable. You know, there's an issue, sheshmekt from stinkach from avodah zarah, go down the other block. Now, you can argue, why would I have to? Is it my fault that they put the incense? No, but it's there. So that's one thing you have to look. Is it efshed or is it loy efshed? Also doesn't mean it's impossible. Loy efshed means that it's not so pashut. It's a big inconvenience for me to take another route. And that obviously will be part of the determining factor whether you can walk down that street or not. So in the case where it's efshed, just as easy you can take the other block. And number two, the other issue here is whether while it's going through your nostrils, are you like saying, that's called mechavan. Again, mechavan doesn't mean that you went down the block to smell it. You're going down this block to get to your destination. But once you're smelling it, it's like you are appreciating the good smell. That's called mechavan. And loika mechavan means you're smelling it. You're not denying the fact that you enjoy that fragrance, but you're not focusing on it. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya regarding a Beinani, there are certain thoughts come into your mind by a Beinani. It's there, but are you allowing it to linger there? That's the Kamachavan. So if efsher, you could have taken just as easy another block. And not only that, but when you're walking by this base avodah zarah and you're smelling the chametz, so then geschmack the Kamachavan. In that case, as we'll see, there's no machlekes. That's for sure prohibited. Likewise, this is the first version, even when lo yafsher means it's unavoidable. Unavoidable means not that there's no other option in the world. Unavoidable means that if you would take the other street, the other route, it's going to give you a big inconvenience, however you define big. So a guy says, no, I can't go on the other block. It's lo yafsher. Even by lo yafsher, according to the first version, if the kamachavin, that's the criteria, that's the ikar, according to this. If when you smell it, you have intent to enjoy it. You have kavana to enjoy it. You didn't go there for that pleasure, but when you're having the pleasure, you're appreciating the pleasure. Kula alma loy pliga, that it's asur. Another case. By
the way, this is just avodah zarah, right? Not like a tray food. You know, if you have a good shmek.
Tray food is not asur b'hano, Danny, but chametz is asur b'hano.
Aha. So if they were cooking chametz,
a bakery. Very good.
Wow. Okay.
Very good. Now, law, that's right from the Mamash Negeya. That's called Hano Bal Karchai. Now, the law yafsher, on the other hand, law yafsher means, we're going to the other extreme, it's unavoidable. There isn't another block, or going down another route is going to mamash, whatever. For me, I can't lose those 20 minutes. It's going to add 20 minutes to my drive. And so that's already one reason to be matir. And on top of that, v'loy mechaven, when I'm walking by, I have no kavanah. I'm not going to focus on it. I don't have any intention to enjoy it. Here also, kolam pliga the shari. Where is there an argument according to the first version? That's where it's going to get fun. To always remember this. Ki pligi the efsher v'loy mechaven. It's taka avoidable. Why didn't you take the other block? You would not be inconvenienced. The efsher. But on the other hand, the loy mechaven, you have no intent to enjoy it. Now we have to add another wrinkle. That's Gavaldik. Guys, let's bring back Rabbi Yehuda, Rab Shimon, by Shabbos and by everywhere else. Davar she'ein ischaven is muter or asur. Not malacha she'ein tzricha legufa, that's chayiv or asur. Here it's for sure not biblically problematic, but the fact that Rabbi Yehuda holds that even when you don't have intent, you are in violation. What does that prove? That for Rabbi Yehuda, intent is not a criterion. We don't care about your intent. So let's just use the example that you have a bench, Shabbos, in your backyard, and you want to take it from one corner to the other corner. Now here, it will be noigeya, how heavy is the bench? That's the efsher v'lo efsher. We'll speak this out more in a moment. Notice, I have an option of picking up the bench and schlepping it to the other side, right? But the lo efsher. The lo efsher means it's very heavy. It's very heavy. I would rather drag it. Now, when I drag the bench, there's a possibility that it's going to make a charitz in the ground, which is connected to plowing. So, but that's not my intent. That's not my intent. Rabbi Yehuda says, if you did that, if it made the charitz, you were violated midrabanan. So says the Rabbi, but the Rabbi Yehuda, the Omar davar she'ein mischavin Asur. Here also, according to Rabbi Yehuda, kolam alei pligi da asur. Because if kavana, whether you had kavana or the maisa happened, even though the loy mechaven, the vort is the efsher. So go down the other block. Ki pligi alibed Rab Shimon. The Omar davar she'ein mischaven is muter. So are you going to say, now, what is the case of Rab Shimon? See, we never spoke this out when we learned Shabbos. Was the case of Rab Shimon when the bench was so heavy that you would be inconvenienced to pick it up? So that's why he says it's okay. That's a big question now. No, was the bench efsher or lo efsher? We never spoke that out. Now we know Rab Shimon holds davar she'ein mischaven. As long as it is not a psik reisha, you're good to go. Guys, just parenthetically, very important shleima. The Ran says, there's other shitas that by hana'ah we don't care about psikresha. That takes away everyone's question in your minds. So let's leave that. And there are many other approaches. Here, there's no issue of psikresha. Here, we're speaking about a case like we mentioned. You're walking by the church and you're going to smell that fragrance. Okay. And we're speaking about a person that likes that fragrance. Some fragrances are disgusting. You have not only do you not have hana'ah, you are revolted. But it's something that otherwise you would have enjoyed. So
Rabbi, according to what we're saying right now, right?
Yes.
According to Rabbi Yehuda, even if you was lo yafshar and
wait. Okay, Danny, wait. Okay, good. Gemara's going to speak it out. I want to help couple. A guy, just for people who want to know, the Ran is in Chol and Daflamed base. It's a very important thing over here. Okay, anyways, so back over here. So I'll leave it at Rab Shimon. That says that no, Rab Shimon, right? Rab Shimon by Yochai, Pnimius HaTorah cares about the Pnimius. He cares about Kavana. Kavana is the main thing over here. If you have kavana to do a sin, that's when you have a problem. If you have no intent, we don't look at the chitzonius, even though you did it. According to Rab Shimon, that says davar she'ein mischaven is not only not prohibited biblically, it's mutter. There's no isur at all. So Abaye says, exactly. I know that it's efshir, but v'loy mechaven. If you're walking by and you have no intent, that's all I care about. So Abaye says, according to Rab Shimon, it's mutter. And Rava says, even according to Rab Shimon, this is something new that we're learning today. We didn't have in Shabbos. Ad kan loy ka'amar Rab Shimon, Elohecha do lo yafsher. Rab Shimon's case was only lo yafsher. Again, means that for you to pick up that bench, oy gevalt, it would be so heavy. So Rab Shimon says, we don't demand of you to inconvenience yourself and find a chaver to help you lift it up. Drag it on the ground. You might, there it's not psikresha. You might make a furrow in the ground. That's not your intent. So it's mutar lechatchila. But that's only because it was a deloy efsher. But the case, according to the first version, aval hecha de efsher. Even Rab Shimon says, listen, even though loy mechaven, but verte gebeten, why didn't you go on down the other block? Gewaldig. So now, that's the first version. And we're going to repeat this when we continue, God willing, after Shabbos, because you have to remember, the second version is different. Ika da Amri, like this. All of this has to do really, Danny, to question, what is the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon? What was their case? But let's come back over here. Now, like this. When it's efsher, v'loy mechaven, which is what we just said is the machlokes Abaye v'Rava bishitas Rab Shimon. No. The case of efsher, lightweight bench, and no kavanah, that is the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. That is the machlokes. So there's not going to be a machlokes amoraim and a machlokes of tanoim. We already have that machlokes. So in the case where you just as easily could have taken another route, even though you don't have kavanah to enjoy the stinkacts, could you not? According to Rabbi Yehuda, here's a chaim, go take the other block, take the other route. It's efsher. According to Rab Shimon, you can stay on this route because loy mechaven. That is their machlokes. So that's not the case of Abaye and Rava. Furthermore, when it's loy efsher, it's unavoidable. Again, unavoidable means that you would have to inconvenience yourself. And the loy mechaven, here, this ikad amri, like the first ikad amri, kol amo loy pliga d'shari. However, what's the ikad amri's machlokes ki pligi, where it is the loy efsher? It's unavoidable. I got to take this block. But when I'm taking this block, my kavanah is not to have hana. My kavanah is to get to the other side. But when I'm smelling that stinkach, I have kavanah to have hana. I give it as a good breathe in. Now again, the other wrinkle. Now let's bring the machlokes. Now I'm bringing the machlokes according to Rabbi Shimon that says that davar she'ein mischaven is mutter, meaning the azel baser kavana. So if the azel baser kavana and you are having kavana, of course, everyone, even Abaye would hold that it's problematic. We're based on who shita are they arguing? Ki pligi punkt fakert aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? The Omar loishna mischaven loishna me'ena mischaven. When it's efshed, it's asur. But when it's not efshed, so understands Abaye, it's mutter. Look inside the Rashi's words, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid, 2 lines before the bottom of Abaye ke Rabbi Yehuda. The Kosavar, Kiven, the Asa Rabbi Yehuda, b'de efshed, because according to the Ikad Amri, the Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is a case of efshed. So what's it? Something you could have. It's a lightweight bench. Right? And afagav the loika machavin. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda says it's asur. Shama mine, the last line in the Amid, that loy hashvinan le kavana. We don't care at all about intent. The only thing Rabbi Yehuda cares about, efsher or loy efsher. That's according to this version. Rabbi Yehuda says, since you could have just as easily picked up the bench, you're not allowed to do it. Ela b'de efsher only. V'loy efsher talia tama. Hilkach, therefore, when it's taka loy efshad, which is the case of this ikada amri's machlokes, it's loy efsher, even though you have kavana, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't care, it's mutter. The whole reason, kavana is b'chlal not on the table. The only reason why Rabbi Yehuda asked davar she'ein mischaven was because why did you schlep it if you could have picked it up? Efsher. But Rabbi Yehuda would be moided that heichad the loy efsher in the bench. Wow. When you have a bench in your backyard and it's heavy, it's hard for you to pick it up. However you define hard. Rabbi Yehuda will be moided, you can drag the bench. That's what Abaye holds. That's why over here, even though v'kamachavin, it's lo yefsher. However, Rava Daf Chavav, we just learned the first few lines, says, At kan lo kama Rabbi Yehuda she'ein mischaven ke mischaven. He's machman even by ein mischaven. It's not that it's not a factor at all, right? He's saying that, no, intent is a factor. But the lack of intent, the lack of intent is not a reason to be lenient. That's a big step. So Rabbi Yehuda is saying, even though you had no intent, you can't say it's mutter. The lack of intent not being a reason to be lenient doesn't mean that intent is not a factor. Rabbi Yehuda is being machmer, saying just because you had no kavana, it doesn't mean you're off the hook. But kavana is of significance. Abul mischaven, which is the case according to the second version, that it's the loy efshed, but for kamechaven, abul mischaven, kshe'ein mischaven l'kula, avadanat. So Rava says that even though the case of Rabbi Yehuda, right, was in the case of efsher, I get that. And here it's b'deloy efsher, but never will intent get you off the hook. If you have kavana, it's prohibited.
Rabbi.
So, let me just recap this because this is something once we have to get this ingrained. The first version says that they are arguing in the case of efsher, v'loy mechaven. And the machlokes is aliba de Rab Shimon. Abaye muteres, Rav asura. The second version is punkt fakert. The machlokes is b'deloy efsher, v'yes v'kamechaven. And the machlokes is aliba de Rabbi Yehuda, Abaye muteres, and Rav asur. We're going to review this. Guys, don't get nervous. And then we're going to take over. But this is a gavaldik sugya to be continued. Yes.
So according to Abaye,
yes,
in this latter version, on Shabbos, Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you have no other way to move that bench, but you actually are intending to do charisha, it's mutter.
Mamash, amazing.
I never heard of such a thing.
I know that. No, just one thing. That by medvaram amurim when it's not psikration. Just remember one detail. Just add that nuance.
How can it not be psikration? He's intending to do it.
No. I'm saying
he wants a furrow.
No, he don't. The kamachabim means
according to this.
Yeah, no.
Right? You want to smell it.
1 second, Danny.
So that means on Shabbos you want the furrow.
I'm schlepping the bench. My bench won't for sure make a charitz. But you know what? If it makes a charitz, that's fantastic. It's a big difference. My kavan is to get the bench to the other side. There might not even be a furrow. If there is a furrow, I'm saying that's amazing. What a nice residual benefit. That's pshat l'kol machavim. And Go, just let it sink in. This is Gavaldik. We're going to repeat the two versions, and the Gemara, just to make it clear, the Gemara at the end is going to refute the first version. That's going to be on Daf Chavav Amud Beis.
So it's going to refute.
It's going to refute the Rava sheet in the first version. But if the Machlekes was stuck in the second version, then the Machlekes stands. And that's a big thing to refute. Halachic Rava. Anyway.